All right, what's up and welcome to Rad Potential. We're working on the 2002 again today, and I've actually done a lot of what I'm about to cover already, and I got carried away just working at it, and I forgot to film or show any of it until I got to the point where I realized there's a ton of useful information, so I wanted to go back and cover it. So we've gone through a lot of things already. We went through a lot of the motor, getting it running, and now we took it for our first drives, and none of the lights worked except for like one of the high beams. So I went through today and started diagnosing and figuring out everything that was wrong and how to fix them and if they're burnt out light bulbs or not. I've got new bulbs here on the table. But first thing I did was diagnose the switch. So the light switch on the interior here, I could tell like wasn't working. It wasn't operating correctly, pulling in and out, and the brights would only stay on when you hold the lever back, not even when you had it up, they wouldn't stay on. So I knew the switch wasn't working properly, and I only had one bright. So first things first, I only had one of the brights working, and so I had other sealed 7-inch beams in the garage here from the Miatas in the past, so I popped another one in there to check if the headlight was working, which is super easy. I'll show you that. There's a little connector in the back here, pulls out, and I plugged it in sitting up here, confirmed that the bright was burnt out on that bulb, put the new one in. And to change these front bulbs is super easy. All you need to do is pull out 4 Phillips screws in the grill. There's one here, one here, one here, and one here. And then the grill comes out, and then there's 3 flat heads that hold this chrome ring on right around the headlight. That pulls off, and then the headlight will fall out. So I swapped out the light, and now that's working. But my low beams still weren't working. So I knew the switch wasn't working, like I said. So let me show you what I did to get to the switch and diagnose the switch. So like I said, I knew this switch was broken because it wouldn't click into its positions, and it was spinning freely. And when it's working properly, it only spins like 2 turns or 1 full turn till it hits a stop. So I knew it was broken. So in order to get the switch out, there's a couple things. First thing you got to do is pull the cluster out of the way. And in order to do that, you'll have to pull your kick panel off down here so you can see up underneath. And then, let's see if I can show you. Let me get my light situated. Okay, so back underneath here, this is the speedometer cable, goes right to the center of the cluster. First thing you're gonna do is screw this out. This slides back, and then there's 2 of these little thumb screws you can just grab on. Zip it out, pull the washer out, and there's another one right to this side behind these wires here. So I'll get that other one and I'll show you the cluster coming out. So now that you have both those thumb screws and the speedometer cable disconnected, the cluster just pulls straight forward. Like such. And then I didn't disconnect the electrical connection or the harness. Clean you off. Didn't disconnect the harness. I simply set this to the side. Just pulled it over like this and sat it right here. That gets it out of the way enough to get the light switch out. So in order to remove the light switch, first you have to pull off the knob, which on these early cars, this is a round Taillight 73. On these early cars, the light switch has a hole through it that I'd stick my pick and then turn it all the way counterclockwise, and you can hold the pick so the switch actually doesn't spin, and then the knob will spin right off. Just like this. Now that the knob is off, there's this little locking collar here. This spins out counterclockwise as well. And this is what holds the switch to the dash. So I just used my pick, as you can see, and spun this around. It wasn't that tight until you can get it well, the pick still helps. But just spin this collar until you spin it all the way off. Once you get the collar all the way off, your switch is free. And at this point, when I went to pull my light switch out, it basically fell into a bunch of pieces. And I'll show you what I had to do to fix it. So it slides right out the back. You can stick your hand where the cluster goes. And then it comes down right here. And then you can unplug it from the harness. And don't do that. I wish I just didn't do that, but I split this little bit of harness, so that sucks. So careful with your brittle old stuff. Like I said, when I took this out the first time, this thing fell into a bunch of pieces. Now I have it zip tied back together and it works fine. So let me cut this open and show you what it looks like inside and how to put it back together. So if yours doesn't fall apart, it's supposed to be stuck together, not really serviceable. These little plastic edges here will crack, and then you have to zip tie it back together to hold it down. But this top part will come off like such, and then there's a bunch of pieces in here. These little metal connectors had fallen out of mine, fallen in place and jammed it so it wouldn't spin. It was spinning freely. It wouldn't go back and forth like this. So you can see all the way in is the off position. You pull it out halfway, it clicks, and then these little knobs on here touch the different circuits here and go into the different connectors. And that's what powers and changes, you know, what lights are on, your running lights or your full-on lights. Anyway, so there's these three little things. This is how you would see it in the dash. On the left, there's one with 2 nipples on it. In the middle, there's a bigger one with 3 nipples. You can see it's got little feet on it that go into these holes, and then the one on the right has no nipples and it sits into the 2 slots. As you can see, there's springs under here that press these against this roof to keep contact. So what I did is I pulled all this apart, sprayed it down with some electrical cleaner, whatever, and then put some grease back in here, some dielectric grease, so it all made good connections. And that's what it looks like to put it back together. This whole thing comes apart. Oh, geez. But you can pull this knob out and clean all this and then put it back together. But I'm going to try to put this back together now. That's the orientation it's supposed to be. This slides right on here. And then you kind of got to push the corners back in, and they'll clip back down underneath the metal tabs on the sides. You got to make sure you do this gently so that your little guys don't move on you. And you push those springs straight down. There, so now it's together, and you can feel, oh, I did something wrong here because that's not working. Really got to make sure these stay in place. I'm slowly or slightly regretting pulling this apart again to show you how I did it now, because I had it all working and now I just bent this thing. So time out, I'm going to put this back together. Alright, I finally got it pushed all back together. This corner of plastic was sticking out harder and the things kept shifting on me. So now that I got it put back together, it won't stay. So that's why I had it zip tied. And the zip tie right around this part of it doesn't get in the way of the connector. So we're going to do that exact same thing again. Take our zip tie and wrap it right around here. Nice and tight. Maybe. There we go. Don't let it come back up while you're doing this, because those things can shift underneath there, and then you got to start all over again. So just yank that zip tie as tight as you can so it doesn't shift at all. So there you go. Now that's good, and you might even want to clean up these, put new grease on it, or clean it off with some 60 or 220 grit sandpaper or whatever you got laying around. So there you go, rebuilt switch. Now you can feel it goes 1, 2, and then it spins and stops, spins and stops. Now we're going to reinstall it the same way we took it out. So installing this back together is just the reverse, obviously. Only thing to note and make sure is when you're putting your speedometer cable back on, is that you make sure you seat the collar of the speedometer cable on the back of the speedometer. It's going to be impossible for me to show it, but once you get your speedometer or your cluster back in place, just make sure that you seat that in there before you screw it down, and make sure you center it at 0 again. So after I got the switch back in, I was able to confirm that it was indeed working properly now, and I'll show you how I did that, at least for my case. Key on, I see everything's getting power, and then this was before my low beams were working. I pulled this out, you can see the low beams kicked on, but they weren't before. And then my brights still would flicker, you can see the brights going on. But now I knew the switch was working, because now when I put my brights on with the actual to stay on, not just flash to pass, they stayed on instead of shutting off. So it'll only do that if your switch is off, or your switch is working and on. See, now nothing happens when you lift it up, only flash to pass works. So there I confirmed that I fixed the switch. So as I said, I confirmed the switch was working, but my low beams were still not working. So what I did next was came to the fuse box right up here in the cowl, and you can see on my half-worn thing, low beams are 3 and 4. So I pulled this out and went to 3 and 4. Here. You see the pattern, 1 through 6, 7 through 11. Grabbed 3 and 4, pulled out each fuse, and took some 600 grit sandpaper, sanded the ends of the fuses and where the fuse sits, right here on this little connector. It was pretty corroded on those two headlight switches, or headlight fuses, and as you can see, now my low beams work. So awesome. Now we're gonna move to the back of the car. So moving to the rear of the car, I had one turn signal working on one side, and I had one running light working on the other side. So I knew that I was getting power to the light buckets. So what I did next, or decided to do next, was start cleaning all the connections. I'll show you down here. This is what it looks like on. There is a thumb screw here and a thumb screw down here, and then this plastic cover comes off as well. Over here I have it all apart. So there's what it looks like underneath, and here's all the lights. So what I did to clean it, so what I did to clean it here was I pulled out the light bulb as such, and then if you look and see in the bottom here, you can see the little tab or the connector that it sits on right here. So I took the sandpaper, you're not seeing anything, I took the sandpaper, put it on top of that little tab, and then you couldn't really sand it very well, so I took a flat Allen key, stuck it in here, and used that to rub it around on the contact surface, and then to ensure it gets good contact, let me show you closer, better light. I bent this back in so it had better contact with the bulb, and then afterwards I sanded with the sandpaper. I touched the tip of the bulb, put it in here with some new bulb grease, and lo and behold, they all work now. I got the whole left side done. And now we're gonna jump in and do the same thing to the right side. So we got the taillights, or the rear of the car, mostly sorted. I'll show you. Well, turn signals work, the brake lights work, one of the running lights work. The running light is not working on the right side, and I actually multimetered it, and it's getting no power there, so I'm gonna have to trace that another day. But let me show you the workings so far. Got running lights, one running light.
One running light.
Brake lights.
Yeah.
And turn signal.
Yep. Yeah. We're safe to go back on the road.
Sweet. All right, well, that's gonna be it for this one. Hopefully, if you're having trouble with lights on your car, that you can use some of the things I did today to help diagnose, figure out what's going on, and get those lights working, or rebuild your light switch. Because I didn't look up how much those cost, but save yourself from buying a new one. It's pretty simple on the inside of it. Clean it out, re-grease it, put it back together. So anyway, there'll be more to come. We got lots more to do on bringing this 2002 back to life. But thanks for following along with this one. Keep it rad.